Good evening, everyone. It is Emily here. I'm with Keep Pearland Beautiful. Thank you for joining us tonight for our May Garden Lecture Series in partnership with the Brazoria-Master County Gardeners. Just a little bit about KPB. Keep Pearland Beautiful is an environmental 501c3 nonprofit. Our three main focuses are on litter prevention, recycling, and beautification. This garden lecture series is part of our beautification program. For other events and programs, visit our website, pearlandrecycles.com, or make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram to stay up to date. For this garden lecture, if you have any questions, please make sure to type them in the comments below, and we will answer them in either at the end or during the presentation as it flows. Also, there's a link to our survey that I will pin in the comments below. Please feel free to submit one for this evening. We really appreciate your feedback. Tonight we have Kimberly Mayer, County Extension Agent for Horticulture, presenting Pecans in a Nutshell.
Thank you so much, Emily. Howdy, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for attending this Facebook Live. Tonight's presentation is about pecans, one of my favorite things, not only to eat, but to teach about as well. So if this is your first time here, again, welcome. We're glad to have you. Like Emily said, my name is Kimberly Mayer. I am the horticulture agent for Brazoria County. My job is to provide educational outreach events and opportunities on all things horticulture related, whether it be trees, turf, or tomatoes, or anything in between. You've come to the right place if you want to learn more about different aspects of horticulture. The other really great part of my job is that I get to oversee the Brazoria County Master Gardeners. They are also a nonprofit organization. They receive their training through AgriLife Extension. And in exchange for their training, they go out and have different types of educational outreach events as well. They often do plant sales and tree sales, and they have some beautiful demonstration gardens here in Angleton that they maintain and keep up. They do lots of great things for our county, and both of our organizations are proud to serve Brazoria County. So let's jump into our presentation tonight. And I wanted to start with this fun little joke. Did you hear the one about the pecan, the walnut, and the cashew? It was nut funny. And neither are the other dad jokes that I have sprinkled throughout this presentation. So we better get started learning about pecans because I know that you came tonight to learn all about them. So this presentation came about as a request from some of our master gardeners after I came back and told them about a pecan short course that I went to back in January. It was a 4-day course intended to provide growers as well as county extension agents with training on all things pecan related. And so what they do is they cram what usually takes several college semesters of instruction into 4 days worth of knowledge. And I'm going to try and cram what I can, what I took away from the class, into the next 45 minutes or so. So needless to say, we are really only just scratching the surface of all that there is to know about pecans. If there's something tonight that I don't cover and you have a question about it, I'll have my email address at the end. It's on the very last slide. You are welcome to shoot me an email and ask your question that way. And then what I'm going to do tonight is just teach from the perspective that most of you are backyard pecan tree growers and not, potential orchard enthusiasts. However, if you do have a need for more information on becoming a pecan grower or growing a number of trees in an orchard, I can get information for you on that as well. So here's just a brief look at everything that we're going to be covering today. I'll share a little bit about our pecan short course, a little bit about the botany and the physiology of pecans. We'll talk about some key things that are good for production, some different pecan cultivars that Texas A&M AgriLife Extension recommends. We'll touch briefly on the USDA pecan breeding program, which is really interesting. And then I'll show you a couple of different ways that you can crack pecans. So before we completely dive into pecans, we need to know how you say pecans and if you say it the right way. So those of you that are on and listening, I would love it if you would just drop it in the comments how you say pecan. Do you say, pecan, like about 34% of America, or do you say pecan, like about 66% of America? I would love for you just to drop that in the comments and let me know what you think. Sometimes we have some very rigid stances on exactly how it should be pronounced. But as you can see from the slide there, America has voted, and 66% of America say pecan. So one little fun fact about pecans, the word pecan is actually derived from a Native American word. It's from Algonquin origin, and it means a nut too hard to crack by hand. So hopefully you had a second or two to drop your comments drop your comments in the comments, I guess you could say. All right, so I talked a little bit about the pecan short course that I went to. It was a phenomenal 4-day course. It has a lot of history at Texas A&M. It actually dates back to 1965 when it started as a week-long class for county extension agents who needed to gain some practical training on pecan culture, pecan grafting, pruning, how to fertilize these trees, and how to have some type of integrated pest management system for these trees. Agents and growers alike attended the course and would listen to lectures from Dr. George McKitchen and other professors on new and emerging subjects such as high density planting, weed management with herbicide, zinc deficiency, pecan scab, and some of the new varieties that have been released. So the class remained on the Texas A&M campus, and it had to find bigger and bigger classrooms to accommodate the growing demand for each class. And so Dr. McKitchen's dedication to the quality and the comprehensiveness of the educational experience, that pecan short course became a national as well as international educational event. Growers from Mexico, South America, Australia, and all throughout the U.S. Made their pilgrimage to Aggieland each January to participate. And so, in fact, what you're looking at there is my class. It was actually the 60th class, and we're holding up our pecan variety boards that we made. And in that class, we had a couple from Australia there. So it truly is still an international class. And then I mentioned the pecan variety board. That's one of the traditions of the short course, is that every participant gets to make a Texas pecan variety board. It's a really unique display of 48 of the most common pecan varieties that are grown in Texas. And then Dr. McKitchen, that I've mentioned several times, still lectures a couple of times for the class. And this pecan short course has been coordinated since Dr. McKitchen's retirement by Dr. Larry Stein since 2002. And then also Dr. Monty Nesbitt took over the leadership of that in about 2012. So again, on the slide there, you've got the picture of the front doors to the Hort center that we're going to talk about in just a second. So those three individuals, Dr. McKitchen, Dr. Stein, and Dr. Nesbitt, combined their extensive pecan knowledge and research and experience into different lectures that touch on just a wide array of important pecan production and topics related to pecan. And again, this class was traditionally held on the Texas A&M campus, but in 2017, it was moved off to the Department of Horticulture Sciences Hort Rec facility. So that just stands for Horticulture Research Extension. And it's about 10 miles from the campus in Burleson County. Technically, I guess you could say it's in Snook, Texas. So this relocation really kind of authenticated the course experience, because now that you were at that research center, they have a pecan orchard just almost directly across the street. And then participants could experience just hands-on demonstrations of how to plant pecan trees, how to prune them, harvesting, and tree spraying. So that really, really did a lot for the course. So let's talk about a little, some of the different parts of a pecan tree. The pecan tree is indigenous to a large area of the United States, extending from the Mississippi River Valley on to east to the western branches of Llano and San Saba rivers of Texas on the west. And then from southern Illinois to the north and northern Mexico, that's where the pecans have been found. And then there are some isolated populations that occur in Alabama and far west Texas and other parts of Mexico. And that's really important to know, because these different types of pecan trees can be a source of diversity and used in pecan breeding, which again, we'll touch on a little bit later in the presentation when we talk about the USDA pecan breeding program. So the pecan, unlike a lot of other horticultural crops, the native pecan is actually very important commercially. If you were to grow a native pecan from seed, it would take about 11 to 12 years before fruiting and nut production. So you'd have to be really, really patient if you're going to plant one by seed. And then as far as the parts of the pecan tree, it does have a really elaborate network of lateral roots that go out from the tree, as well as a taproot. So let's dive into a little bit more of the botany of a pecan tree. As you probably know, pecan trees are very large and can reach up to 70 feet tall or more and have a 6-foot trunk diameter. The leaves on a pecan tree are alternate and pinnate, meaning that the leaves are not opposite of each other on the stem, but alternate, one above the other. Pecan leaves consist of about 9 to 15 leaflets. The flowers are unisexual, which means they have male and female flowers, but they're separate. The male flower are called catkins, and they are arranged in a group of anywhere from 2 to 8, and they're connected or by a common peduncle. The female flower is a star-shaped terminal, and the male flowers appear to arise from the previous season's, let's see, sorry, I lost my spot here. From the previous season's wood, but they're actually produced on the current season's growth. The pistillate flowers are also produced on the current year's growth. When you get fruit set, those nuts typically occur in clusters of 2 to 6. You can see that in the in this photo here. And depending on the cultivar, depending on the type of variety of pecan tree, The pollen shedding and the receptivity are what we call asynchronous, meaning it doesn't happen at the same time. So in order to have maximum productivity, cross-pollination is usually required. And we'll talk more about that in a couple more slides. So in the last photo here, you can see that the fruit is a stone or a nut. It's enclosed in a really thick green husk, and that eventually splits into 4 parts when it's mature. What that husk does is it provides something called photosynthate. That's basically a sugar, a carb, and it protects the developing nut. So fun little fact about pecans, the inside of the nut, that kernel, is usually liquid until September when it solidifies. Another fun little fact, we talked about catkins up here in the first photo. I actually just got back from a horticulture retreat and professional development. And one of the tours that we went on was to the city of San Saba. San Saba is the pecan capital of the world. We were able to go to a really beautiful pecan orchard and learn more about pecans. But what I thought was interesting is that San Saba has what they call a catkin ball about this time of year. And that's where basically they celebrate the pecan. They have a really fancy dinner outside at a local park with lots of native pecan trees around. And of course, you'll have catkins falling during that dinner as well. So that was kind of a neat thing that they do to celebrate the pecan tree. All right, so I got another fun dad joke for you. It goes like this. The walnut got in trouble for peeking through the window. I know, it's really bad, and I said pecan the wrong way, but it's kind of fun to have those dad jokes in there. So the pecan, it's called Carya illinoisensis, is a member of the plant family of Juglandaceae. That is a mouthful. This family includes the walnuts and the hickories, actually. We talked about this, but the pecan tree is large. It can grow up to 70, maybe even to 100 feet high. And it has a really stately appearance. I think pecan trees are beautiful. It's been proclaimed the state tree of Texas. Texas adopted the pecan tree as its state tree in 1919. In fact, Texas Governor James Hogg liked pecan trees so much that he asked if a pecan tree could be planted at his gravesite when he died. So going back to the family, the walnut family here, the hickory family here, the largest of the hickories, it's a deciduous tree. It has a uniform, symmetrical, broadly oval crown, and it's massively branched. Its large major limbs grow up and out from the trunk in a distinctive, upright, spreading fashion. On older trees, the lower branches become really wide, sweeping, and sometimes the tips of their branches almost touch the ground. Quite beautiful. Take a quick drink. All right. So pecans are one of the most valuable cultivated plants that originated in North America. They've improved varieties with large, thin-shelled nuts. They have been grown in plantations or orchards in the Southeast. And pecans are actually also harvested locally from wild trees. In fact, in San Saba, when we were up there last week or so, they have lots of native pecans there that they harvest and use where they can. Of course, those particular pecans are much smaller than the improved varieties, but there is a small market for those. The wood of pecan trees is often used for furniture, for flooring, and sometimes charcoal for smoking meat. And actually, very few people know that the history of pecans is tied closely to the history of the founding of our country. Pecans, like I said, are native to the United States, and they were found nowhere else in the world. So they became a really important food source for settlers and our founding fathers. In fact, Thomas Jefferson planted seeds at Monticello and gave some to George Washington. And now those pecan trees are the oldest trees at Mount Vernon. All right, a couple more pecan fun facts. There are actually over 1,000 varieties of pecans. A lot of these are named after Native American Indian tribes like Cheyenne, Mohawk, Sioux, Choctaw, Shawnee. A lot of those varieties have those Native American names. In 1886, the first recipe for pecan pie was published. And annually, the United States produces more than 300 million pounds of pecans. That's quite a lot. And so we talked briefly, and I mentioned about the history of pecans. And so to go into a little bit more detail on that, in 1772, the first planting of pecan trees actually took place in Long Island, New York. And again, Thomas Jefferson, who was actually a horticulturalist, planted pecan trees at Monticello, and he sent those seeds to George Washington. In fact, Washington was known for carrying pecans in his pocket. And so that very first pecan orchard was actually established by a man named Robert Prince in 1737 in Flushing, New York. And he called it the Linnaean Botanic Gardens and Nurseries. So initially, he grew a variety of fruits, but eventually started growing a really hardy pecan tree. And then during the Revolutionary War, the trees in this nursery were so important that General George Washington sent armed troops to protect the nursery from destruction. They had a protection detail. So through the entirety of the Revolutionary War, Washington was always known to keep that pocket full of pecans. It's kind of something that he became known for. And so now that the food chain could go on uninterrupted, they were able to, use those pecans throughout that time. And especially for their soldiers, they were power-packed full of protein. It was a good fat. And so, you could say that some pecan history was made during the founding of our country. It's kind of a neat fact there. So pecans are kind of all over the map. New Orleans, Louisiana, which is located near the mouth of the Mississippi River, became very important to the marketing of pecans. The city had a natural market as well as an avenue for redistributing pecans to other parts of the United States and to the world. So the New Orleans market gained local interest in planting orchards, and that stimulated the adoption of vegetative propagation techniques and led to the demand for trees that produced just superior nuts. They didn't just want those small native pecans. They wanted a really good outcome, a superior nut. So during the 1700s and the early 1800s, the pecan became an item of commerce for the American colonists, and the pecan industry was born. And actually in San Antonio, the wild pecan harvest was more valuable than the popular row crops like cotton. So pecan groves and orchards consisted of nuts with various sizes, shapes, shell characteristics, flavor, and ripening dates. And in the midst of all this variability, there was the occasional discovery of a wild tree with unusually large, thin-shelled nuts. And that is what was in such high demand by customers. So in 1822, Abner Landrum of South Carolina discovered a pecan budding technique, which provided a way to graft plants derived from superior wild selections, or in other words, to unite with a growing plant by placing it in close contact, grafting, as we know it. So this invention was kind of lost or overlooked until 1876, when there was an African-American slave from Louisiana named Antoine, and he successfully propagated pecans by grafting a superior wild pecan to seedling pecan stalks. Anton's clone was named Centennial because it won the Best Pecan Exhibited Award at the Philadelphia Centennial Exposition in 1876. And so that planting, which eventually became 126 centennial trees, was the first official planting of improved pecans. And so the successful use of grafting techniques led to grafted orchards that had just superior genetics, and really became a milestone for the pecan industry. The adoption of these techniques was kind of slow, didn't have a whole lot of impact until they began doing it on more of a commercial level. And so that was the start of a booming and growing pecan and shelling industry. In fact, quite a lot of work for these pecan shellers to go through before a shelled pecan is ready to be sold. It's got to be cleaned and sized, and several other things before it can actually be put on the market. All right. So let's talk about some of the keys to production. During the pecan short course, the AgriLife specialist offered several keys to be successful at growing pecan trees. And here are some of the most important ones that we'll touch on. Planting properly, irrigation, sunlight, pollination, nutrition. IPM is integrated pest management, and some of the recommended cultivars. So I'm watching my time here, so I may start to pick this up a little bit. But let's talk about proper planting. So when you're planting a pecan tree, before you even start, you want to make sure that your soil is ready to go. The ideal soil pH for pecans is about 5.8 to 7.5. So there's a little bit of room for different types of soil in there, but make sure that your soil pH is within that level. Once you plant that pecan tree, there's two schools of thought. There's arguments for and against whether or not you should cut back that pecan seedling once you've planted it. And when I say cut back, I mean a half to a third of the tree would need to be cut back. And so there's two schools of thought, I guess you could say, two arguments for and against, and that's AgriLife extensionists and orchardists versus landscapers and arborists. So the argument for, which is what our extension specialists recommend, is to cut back that tree once it's planting. And the reason being is that that pruning of the tree reduces transpiration demand, or it reduces the need for as much water, allowing the roots plenty of time to grow. And then you're also training that tree the proper way that it should grow by pruning it early. And then the argument against is usually talked about by arborists, maybe even landscapers as well. And the argument against that is that they say that all leaves make energy, and which is photosynthesis, and that it's necessary for the new roots. And the reduction of branches or leaves can slow the plant's transplant shock and early regrowth. So two schools of thought there, and I'll let you decide what to do when you plant your pecan tree, whether you cut it back or let it go. I will tell you this, listening to the lecture from Dr. McKitchen, he talked about having success, even if you have an orchard, having profit, is having a well-drained soil profile. And in order to do that, you also, which we'll talk about in just a second, is irrigation. And in addition to having good success with that tree, is applying 60 inches of water from April through October over the orchard floor or on the particular trees that maybe you have in your backyard. You also want to make sure that you have plenty of spacing. We talked about how big these pecan trees can get, and so what AgriLife Extension recommends is that the very minimum spacing between pecan trees is 35 feet. Probably need a little bit more than that, but that is the actual minimum. And I'll share some more about that in another slide. So we talked about irrigation. Water is just vital for producing good-sized nuts that are well-filled. The volume of water needed to support a crop-bearing pecan tree is believed to be as much as 150 gallons of water per day on large bearing trees in the hot midsummer months. Insufficient water in the months of May, June, and July can result in smaller than normal nuts. Insufficient water in the months of August and September will result in wafer-like kernels or hollow nuts. And insufficient water in October can result in shucks that fail to open normally. So for best growth and vigor, you want to water year-round, even in the winter months when rainfall is lacking, to maintain the health of those feeder roots. Something that Dr. Monty Nesbitt touched on quite a bit during the pecan short course is August 15th. That's when you're either going to have victory or defeat with your pecan trees, what he said. August 15th, that date is as big as the nut is going to be. And so irrigation and pest management is critical. There are 4 weeks in September when it needs the most water, when it's building those kernel layers. And that late irrigation, in September, October, even up to November is critical for nut fill. If you want to have a full nut in there, when you crack it open, that irrigation is critical. It's also important when you're first planting those trees to hand water them. They need a good deep watering when you're first planting those. Now, we said how important irrigation is, but you don't want to irrigate too much. Overwatering is a major killer of trees and of orchard. So I bet your question is, so how much? So if you have a clay soil, you are going to want to water 1 to 3 times per week in the first year, and 1 to 2 times per week in the second year. Irrigation, very important. All right, we're gonna have to keep moving. Let's talk about sunlight briefly. Pecan trees need to be in full sun. They need an abundant amount of sunlight to increase growth and nut production and to reduce that limb dieback. When pecan trees are crowded, it increases the times that they are alternate bearing, meaning that they'll bear nuts one year and not the other. It also reduces their nut size and quality. So even if you have larger trees that are shading your pecan trees, maybe from a neighbor or another piece of property, those trees need to be of similar heights and far enough apart that those trees aren't blocking the sun from your pecan tree so that it can produce really well for you. Again, those trees can grow up to 70 feet in height. And if they are planted far apart, more than 35 feet apart, even up to 70 feet apart, those trees, as large as they get, will not crowd each other for approximately 4 decades. So again, proper planting, irrigation, and sunlight, all critical to having success with your pecan trees. All right. I'm gonna go through this very quickly and skip a lot of the details on here, but if you have other questions about pollination, again, please feel free to email me and I can give you some more details. But it basically, in a nutshell, there are 2 types of pecan trees that pollinate, type 1 and type 2. It's important that you have both types when you're planting so that you get that cross pollination. And again, that's just, I'm looking at time here. I want to make sure I stay on time, so I'm not going to go into a whole lot of details. But basically, in order to get nut set, you'll need both types of those. And there's a list there of some of the type 1 and type 2. Let's talk briefly about nutrition for pecan trees. Firstly, in order to identify if you have any type of nutrient deficiencies, you'll want to take a soil sample and leaf sample as well. And you can mail those to our plant, soil, and water testing lab at Texas A&M and College Station. I can send you that link if you need that. That soil test will tell you all the different levels of nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, and many others, how much you have, how much you need, and if you need to amend your soil. Pecan trees are a tree that need quite a bit of zinc. They're often very low in zinc. And so that zinc deficiency can result in really small leaves and what they call bunchy terminals. And that's one of the reasons that your pecan tree needs, that pH level at a certain amount so that it can take up that zinc. If it's not at the correct pH level, it can't always take up that zinc. And so you'll notice pecan orchards spray quite a bit. One of the things that you might see them spraying is zinc. The best time to do that, according to Dr. Larry Stein, it's when the leaves, and I love this, you want to write this down, when the leaves of a pecan tree are as big as a squirrel's ear, you should be spraying zinc. So I love the fact that Dr. Stein shares his wisdom and experience in such layman terms for us to be able to understand. Excuse me. All right. Also, with pecan trees, they are subject to quite a few insects and disease, and so again, because of time, I'm not going to go too far into detail on here. I do have a homeowner's guide to pest management for pecan trees. If you notice that your pecan tree is succumbing to some type of insect, you're more than welcome to shoot me an email and I will send you that schedule, and it will tell you when to spray, what to spray for, and lots of different information on there to help you have a good integrated pest management system for your pecan trees. So please reach out to me if you need that information. Let's talk quickly about some of the recommended cultivars that AgriLife Extension recommends. According to Dr. Larry Stein, the perfect pecan variety has the following characteristics. It's got large yields. It has anywhere from 29 to 58 pounds of pecans per tree. It has a high percentage of kernel. When you crack that pecan open, you want that kernel to be filled 50 to 56%. You want it to shell out in perfect halves. Isn't that wonderful? You want that tree to bear nuts every year. You want it to mature early in the season and come into production at an early age. And it would also be nice if it was disease resistant and insect tolerant as well. And so on the screen there are about 6 different cultivars that do well in our area. In the eastern part of the state, central eastern part of the state, we want to make sure that we get really good air movement and lots of spacing due to the fact that we get so much rain and humidity. You really want those trees planted far apart, and lots of good air movement through them to prevent some of the disease and insect pressure that they may face. All right, I threw this slide in there just for some fun. The Texas Pecan Growers Association has a website, and it's got this holiday pecan trail map. Maybe some of you, if you're listening in tonight and really like pecans, also like to give them as gifts. So they have this really fun pecan trail map, different local pecan stores that you can go to if you want to purchase pecans for your loved ones for Christmas or birthdays or what have you. You can find this map on it's tpga.org, Texas Pecan Growers Association. So I thought that'd be kind of fun. All right. Did you know that the U.S. produces 80% of the world's pecan crop, and shellers process up to 150,000 pounds daily? That is crazy, and that is one heavy nut. It would actually take 5,640 pecan halves to equal the weight of a standard watermelon. So that's a lot of pecans. And actually that 150,000 pounds that they shell daily is actually enough to make 300,000 pecan pies. Doesn't that sound delicious? All right. I touched briefly on the fact that we were going to talk about the USDA pecan breeding program. We'll touch on it just fairly quickly. We learned about this in our pecan short course in January. But basically right next door to the Hort Rec Center in that Somerville Snook area is the USDA pecan breeding program. And they just recently had some really great upgrades and renovations to their facility, and they have some really state-of-the-art labs there now that will help them with their pecan breeding program. And so that's just kind of a look at what they look for. The pecan breeding program started in 1931. It's been going on for quite some time. And if you'll notice there, it takes 28 years for an average testing period for a pecan tree. And those are some of the criteria that they're looking for under there. And so it actually takes a very long time for them to find and release a new variety. And so it is 2024, and so they have been able to introduce some new technology to their pecan breeding program. And so now they have an app called Field Book, where their researchers can go out into the field and collect data and put it into an app. They can upload photos, add different traits, growth rates, all kinds of great information and data into that app, and be able to take that back into the lab and continue their research. And so because of some of this technology that they have, they've actually been able to reduce their research and release new cultivars, new varieties in 18 years instead of 28 years. So hooray for technology. I won't even begin to go into the details of all the amazing things that they are doing They are much smarter than me, but kudos to them for working so hard and for so long to help us come up with some new varieties of pecan trees. So as we're winding up here, I just wanted to show you a couple different ways that you can crack pecans. In some of my lectures, I often bring different types of tools that you can use to crack pecans. So there's a couple for you there on the slide. I actually really like this middle one here. If you take that tool and crack open each end of the pecan, like crack it on one side and then crack it on the other end, it opens up for you really well, and that seems to be my favorite of all the ones there. This one here on this end here is actually an electric pecan cracker, and when we teach this to the kids, we let the kids come and do that, and it's really loud and kind of throws pecan shells out, and the kids really get a kick out of that. So there's lots of different ways that you can crack those shells. All right, so I'm gonna close there so that we don't go over any time. I hope that you had that I shared lots of great information on pecans and the pecan breeding program and some fun facts. And maybe you used to say pecan and now you're going to say pecan like a good Texan. But I will close it out there, and I am happy to answer any questions if there are any. Again, I've got my email address on here. If you do have questions, please feel free to send me an email. I'm happy to send you any pecan spraying schedules or any additional information that you need. Maybe you're excited and you want to start your own pecan orchard. I'm happy to share some information like that for you. But if there aren't any questions, then I will close this out. And thank you, Emily, and Keep Pearland Beautiful for hosting us once again. And that's all that I've got.
Yes, thank you for presenting tonight. And most of the comments did say pecan. So
Good, good. There's my good Texans. Good. Awesome. But no questions or anything?
No questions yet.
Perfect. Not a problem.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again for having us, and we'll look forward to being back again next month for our next garden lecture.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emily.